John,
Angie,
how's your week been so far?
pretty good actually.
Well, tell me.
I had a really great coaching session with a client and felt like we really connected.
Okay, connected how?
Well, he's a very prominent business leader and he'd just come back from vacation and told me all sorts of details about his experiences whilst he was away.
Okay, so what did you end up coaching him on?
Oh, well, we didn't really get to the coaching in this session, but we do now have some really amazing rapport. And we'll get to the coaching next time, I guess.
Don't you use a framework with your coaching clients?
What, do you mean like those things in the kids' playgrounds?
No, that's a climbing frame. A framework is a preset sequence of themes and topics for your client sessions. Do you want to know more?
Oh, you know I do.
Okay, then let's start the show.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Besignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh. That's hilarious. Playing in the playground. Although, I mean, I guess if you think about it, it's a really great visual because sometimes that's how coaching sessions can go. If you're not following something.
My first memory of getting to the top was on a climbing frame.
Was climbing. Okay. So let me ask you seriously though, do you follow any type of specific framework when you're coaching with clients, or do you wing it?
I've done both and I still do both. It depends on the coaching that I'm doing. So I do some coaching for another organization as a client. And that's pretty much winging it. There's no formal structure, although in the group coaching I do for them, there is. And in one-to-one stuff I do personally, I do follow a format and formula of things that I want to make sure people get through because it's a more specific kind of coaching consulting arrangement where that's necessary.
Okay.
So yeah, a mixture is the answer.
So let me ask you something. Since you do both, and there's a specific reason I am asking you this, but do you notice any difference in the outcomes when you're doing it with a framework and without? Do you see any difference between those?
Not really. Not anymore. I think if I were in my earlier days as a coach, I would probably find it a bit more challenging to do the freeform stuff. I think it took a while to develop that, to be effective with it, so that it wasn't actually just long conversations where we didn't really get to the point. So sometimes knowing exactly what you're going to be talking about or what the main topical theme is for a session before you go into it can be really helpful. But if it isn't, I know now how to get into a topical theme really quickly with them. We don't waste a lot of time.
Yeah, no, I think what you said there is key. And being that you know how to make sure that it doesn't kind of just fall off and go, okay, now where are we? We're so far in the weeds. Neither one of us can find our way out, because something you and I have talked about many times is that you are the pace car, right? You are the leader of those sessions. And even though a client might come in and say, I know we were going to talk about this today, but I really need to talk about this. And I'm good with that because I feel like I want to meet people where they are. And sometimes it's like I had a really bad interaction with my boss, or it's been, I have this great interview opportunity coming up and I'm petrified. Well, what I'm going to talk about is not teaching them how to have a great interview, right? I'm going to help them get past like the fear. So it's amazing to be able to do that. And here's the reason why I specifically asked you is because something I noticed is when you start working with a client, nothing's been uncovered. So there's like a million different directions you can go into.
Yeah.
And it seems like I can just literally put my hand into the bucket, pull something out, and I'm going to come up with a gem. That's great. But I do believe for myself personally, I like having a specific topic, or hence the framework, in the very beginning, so that I'm laying good foundation. I'm kind of starting at the beginning of the story instead of like, let me go midway and then say, okay, Len, let's take you back. The other thing that pops up for me is time longevity. So here I am saying it's really great in the beginning because even though the world is your oyster, stay focused. But later, the longer I have found, the longer I work with a client, the easier it is to go off into the weeds and just have a conversation rather than, what was your big challenge this week? I hate that question and I don't ask it. You know what I mean? Like, you're laughing, but
Yeah.
So I feel like there could be really great advantages to having a specific framework under those circumstances.
I like framework to the extent of you will always have somewhere to go if you have a framework. So if you get to a point in your session, I don't really know where to go now, and I'm sure you would have heard this in a session, I don't really know what I want to talk about or what I want to work on. If you get the answer and you don't already know how to move them past that, where do you go? So if you have a framework, you move them into the framework. Really easy, makes your life and their life a lot easier. Okay, well, on the framework is where we'd go next. Great, let's talk about that. In conversation, I'm going to be like, all right, so all parts of your life are running top level 10 and you don't need to work on anything. Is that right? Well, no. Okay, so
yeah. No,
tell
I
me
know
would be a
that.
good place for us to look at.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. You're like, I love that because I've actually said that. Like, oh, so this is great. So we need to end the session. We're done. You don't need coaching, and kind of poking fun, right? I'm being a little more sarcastic than you. But let me ask you, God, what I was going to ask you. So what do you feel like the potential, and I'm going to use this word lightly, but what are the potential dangers or downfalls to not using a framework?
I think one of them is if you really don't know how to keep the conversation on track or how to keep the coaching on track, and you haven't pre-framed a lot of stuff with them, that you could end up falling into rabbit holes and irrelevant conversations. You mentioned it many times in our episodes previously about having that expensive cup of coffee with someone. If there's no real value to that conversation, if it's just like a bit of chit chat or getting some stuff off your chest, whatever, I understand there's no value to that, but it's not actually what you're there for. It's not a coaching session. Then in that situation, it's just an expensive cup of coffee. You might as well have just gone out to the coffee shop and chat to a random stranger and make a new friend. But it has to have some value, and you want to help people get in the direction of that. Well, what are you in coaching for? What is it you want to be, do, have, or create in your life? And if you're not good at automatically keeping things reined in and on track, you will find yourself getting derailed, especially by people who are very good at derailing the conversation or the direction that you might be going in. I will relate it in some sense to what I do is sometimes on my other podcast when I'm interviewing guests. It's so easy to find yourself going down rabbit holes in a conversation with a guest that you have to be able to pull things back in and keep the conversation on track, because you have an audience that's going to be listening to this. And you're either going to end up having to edit out a huge chunk of nonsense or irrelevant crap to where you could have saved yourself the time and kept things on track. And yeah, it seems like a very cultivated and manicured conversation to some degree, but it's much more impactful. It's much more directed.
No, I agree. I think I do believe that overall having something, because also too, what does that framework consist of, right? You have to be, if you're going to create and or follow a framework, it needs to make sense. You don't want it to just be random. It needs to be intentional. There needs to be a specific reason for it. And I do like to start when I'm coaching somebody, like, let's get some clarity. All right, we had a discovery call. You're now a client. You've signed up. And we've talked about, I know you want to do, these are some of your focus points, this and this, right? And I usually, when I'm in that discovery call, I really limit it to 3, because we're not here to save the entire lifespan of your existence. That's not where we're starting anyway. And that stuff will come later. But what are the big, what are the top 3 big nuggets right now for you? This way, when I'm formulating or following, I'm being intentional about what that framework looks like so that this is funny. I actually have a friend who's a coach, and interestingly, and I don't think this is bad per se, but the dig is always like, let me find that pain point every single session. And I think it can be very effective, but I also feel like let's give people a chance to bask in some of their accomplishments, like any other goal that you set for yourself, right? I want to lose 100 pounds. That's great. If we focus on that 100 pounds and the pain of getting there, we're never going to lose that 100 pounds. That's my opinion of that. So I think that it can be really beneficial, but I also think we have to be careful because we also want to allow some rays of sunshine into this process. And I've watched, again, because I've seen it, I've experienced it. I've watched people. I also have had clients that feel like coaching has to be negative, right? Like, I'm here for help. I'm here to change. And I just know it's going to be uncomfortable. And they feel like maybe that's what the sessions need to look like. And I'm like, this is going to be fun, exciting, and sometimes hard.
Yeah, there are times when that's important. And I do think we've talked about triage discovery calls before. And that's a place where you do need to be able to help to dive into somebody's pain points.
Yeah.
Probably not going to be super deep on that because of the nature of that call and you don't have the complete relationship yet, but you do need to be able to establish whether the relationship is going to work or not. Does that need to happen in every call? I'd say not. You and I have both worked in sales arenas, and sales that people are kind of wise to this now, especially if they've worked in sales as well. You and I, if we were on a sales call with someone else and they were trying to sell us, because we're kind of savvy on that, if they're trying to get into our pain points, we know exactly what they're doing. All right, fine. You want to get into my pain points, and then we are deciding whether we're going to let them do that or not. But you know exactly what's going on, and I think people are a lot wiser to that. If you're doing that all the time in your coaching, it's a little bit formulaic as well. But sometimes not everything that's going on is pain points that need to be resolved. Sometimes it is that. Sometimes I think you do need to take a look at the aspirational and inspirational as well as the elements of pain or discomfort in life as well. Sometimes that will happen in the same session. You look at both of those aspects.
Yeah.
But I certainly am aware some coaches are more focused on them moving away from. Here's my take on this. You may or may not agree. If all you're really focused on is what you want to move away from, you're only really going to be able to move people as far as their comfort zone.
I agree. I think that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's logical because there's nothing to grab on to.
And so that you're just getting them far enough away from the pain that it's not painful anymore.
Right. But that doesn't mean that there's, I don't want to use the word productivity there because that's such a big topic itself. But I mean, like, it doesn't mean that you're bringing them into a productive sequence of sessions and outcomes.
But exactly. And this is one of the reasons why, let's take diets as an example. One of the reasons why so many diets fail for people is because if you're, all right, my weight's an issue, I've got to do something about it, you start the diet. You move far enough away, I'm not feeling that weight's such an issue right now, not quite so painful. And then you start to backslide and you start to fall back into those old habits. And it becomes a repetitive cycle in your life of what do they call it? Perpetual dieting. But it just never ends, this sort of up and down, because you're only ever getting to comfort zone. You're not ever really getting to the result that you want. You're just trying to get away from what you don't want.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this is interesting. I didn't always use framework. So that's why I asked you that question in the very beginning, because in my mind, I was immediately able to draw the comparison. I think that when I started, I was a good coach because I was always curious. And I was never the coach that was like, let me tell you what to do, because you know what? I don't even know if I did that consciously. I just think that when I was being mentored and or coached, I absolutely despised being told what to do. I hated it and it didn't work for me. So I'm sitting here scratching my head going, yeah, that just didn't work for me. So I think I naturally tried to stay away from that, which made me a better coach than most for the beginning, right? For who I was in the beginning, I wouldn't say if I rated myself then now to then, it's light years, right? I'm nothing like that person because everything I do is intentional, even if it sounds matter of fact and flowy, and I'm still being a coach. But I definitely can look and I can say to myself, yes, I think following the framework has just made me, or a framework has made me a better coach. I don't want our listeners to misunderstand though. Don't, just because there's a topic or a theme, which is what we're really talking about, doesn't mean that the entire session is scripted, right? There's still that element of, just because I'm talking about, let's just say energy or something or self-worth, whatever I'm talking about, I'm not following a script, but I do have some specific questions to help in case it gets stuck, in case it gets like they're resistant, they are high level, kind of what you said, like we know when we're being sold to. So if I have a client that's super resistant, I might have one or two questions that I pull out that can kind of get things back on track. But I don't want our listeners to misunderstand that it's just a theme or a topic that we're talking about. I am anyway. Not that the entire session is like, question number one, let me ask you this.
I have once in my life, I will say it's just one time, been on a coaching call with a coach who, it was a scripted coaching call. Ultimately it was. And
Did
she
you barf?
really just, not exactly, but it was, I think I was very much gritting my teeth whilst we were in that conversation, because the whole thing was clunky. And she was really just waiting for me to finish answers so she could move on to the next question. And it was one of those situations I'm thinking, this is someone who had a coaching business. So I'm thinking, how do you even have a business? How do clients even come back to this? Some of them do. Some of them seem to be okay with it. But as a coach, I thought she was a terrible coach.
That's fair. Yeah. Because here's what happens when you follow a script within a topic, right? I think what happens is you lose the authenticity of the coaching session. And I think this dials back to what you said. If you want to be a great coach, you need to know how to navigate in the moment, because you don't know what the client is going to say. I've had clients that have said things to me that have literally curled my hair, right? Like, and listen, and we all live who I am by now. I'm not shocked by many things. Nothing surprises me. Nothing insults me. I'm not offended easily. And I've heard things and I'm like, I can't believe I'm hearing this. This is crazy to me. But it's because of what I've allowed, right? Because I've opened up that session so that person feels so comfortable that there's room for them to bring what they need to bring, instead of me going, well, no, we're going to talk about this question, right? And honestly, there's very few topics that you talk about in coaching in terms of framework that you can't apply to almost anything, right? So if we're talking about, let's say, fear, there's no possibility that I don't know, maybe I'm being arrogant when I say this, I'm sorry, but if I'm talking with somebody, I can find the pain point, always. I don't care if it's about their cooking. I can find a pain point. I can dial it back to a belief and a story, because I've learned naturally kind of how to do that. So that's like part of having the benefit of a topic maybe. And then, because I think differentiating that is really important. Doesn't mean I have the set criteria where I'm like, so John, what are you afraid of? Are you sure you're not afraid of that? How do you know you're not afraid of that? You know what I mean? That's annoying.
You know what I'm afraid of. Yeah, but...
Me? No, I'm joking.
I think it would be interesting for our listener, potentially, if we actually gave some examples of the kinds of things that we have had in frameworks that we've used. Because we're just saying frameworks. I mean, it's like there are different kinds of frameworks. What have been some of the frameworks you've used, and what would be examples of like session topics that you would have had there?
I think that's what I was getting at. So framework versus topic. So one of my certifications, and this is kind of what I'm going to go to, because it's easy. I have my own frameworks Like if I'm doing leadership or if I'm doing relationship coach, like whatever coaching I'm doing. But when I became a certified high performance coach, there was a specific framework that entails. And I use that framework, I would say, because I love it. It's just me, love it, always. So first session is always about clarity. And there are specific questions provided that I can ask. But again, at this point, I'm kind of going into it like we need to kind of clear things up. And the reason I do this as the first session is because I need to see where this client really needs to go first, right? Out of all the things that we could be coaching on, where they need to. And it may not be what they intended, right? But I'm not here to disprove them or prove that this is right or wrong for them. I just need to test it out. So that's one specific topic that I start with, but it's also one that I can bring back whether I'm in session 1 or session 8, right? So that for me is one. What do you use?
A few different things. So there is a whole process that I can go through with people of, I get the first part is similarly to clarity of essentially what do you want? And then we'll spend a whole session on why do you want it? Yeah. We can spend a session on what are the obstacles or blockages to that. These are things that on group calls I've done this whole process within a call, but in one-to-one sessions we can actually go pretty deep on this stuff and spend a lot longer on it. So some of that is led by the client to a degree, but also there's an element where a framework I may use was like, well, let's take some specific life areas.
I was just
going to, like wheel of life kind of stuff.
Yep.
One of the oldest coaching tools in the book, but it really still a really helpful tool of what do you actually want? What do these areas of life look or feel like for you in terms of where you want them to be and where they are right now? That gives you probably one of the strongest indications of where they're at in their life right now. But I also find that there's really a whole bunch of things you could go into, but probably these are two of the bigger things. Like maybe want to spend sessions, like you might want to go through a whole process where you're going to spend a session on going into their values and what's important to them, going into unconscious beliefs from childhood and reprogramming. And there's so many different things you could have in a framework. I haven't come across too many other substantiated frameworks that do that much different to those. But when we talk about frameworks, it's kind of having those themes for a session that, and I will frame this up with clients in advance of, this is probably what we're getting at. This is what we'll talk about next time. Either they bring up some things, all right, let's come back to that next time if that still feels appropriate, or let's get onto this topic next time. And again, if other stuff comes up that feels more of a priority, we'll go into that. But this is the plan for the next session. So that's already pre-done to a lot of the time. I'll even empower clients. I think it's empowering clients to actually get them prepare. I'm trying to find the right word. To prepare them, pre-frame them for showing up prepared for their sessions. So, you show up. You should show up to our sessions knowing what you want to work on or what would be valuable to you. If you come into the session and you don't, we'll figure it out. But it's going to be much more impactful and a much swifter process for you if you come onto the call and you know what you want to work on.
It's interesting because when I create a framework, because this is something that, I have people that'll purchase a specific like high performance package from me. Obviously, I've been around a minute, so I do different things in different ways. However, regardless of, so sometimes I use something that's already standard that I am legally able to use. And then there's times when I go, you know what, I need to kind of cherry pick with this client. And I'm going to build a framework around them specifically. Okay. To your point, it's not etched in stone. It's just a guide. It's sometimes we're going to hit a detour and I'm not going to sit there. I'm not going to go, okay, well, now we can't do this because this was supposed to be the session number 5. But it's interesting. This is interesting. So when I present them and I tell them in advance, this is what I'm presenting. This is your package. Interestingly, I've had, and not in a negative way, I've had clients come back in beforehand and say, I don't understand. Like, I don't know how I feel about influence because that could be a topic. And it happens to you. It usually is the most powerful of the sessions that I do because I'm talking about influence, persuasion, and they don't understand at the time what that entails, like what comes into play there, whether it's their communication or how they feel small in a room, like you have no idea. So sometimes they kind of look at the framework and go, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to trust you because you are the coach, that you're the captain of the ship. I may not understand the path that we're going to take to get where we're going, but you're the captain. I need to trust you. And I think that's kind of the thing. It's like they really don't know. We don't even really know where it's going to land. You never know how it's going to go with a client. But I think overall, I like having topics and a frame. And I'm more loose with the actual framework than I am with the topic. Do you know what I mean? Like, because sometimes I've had clients that are like, I know we're supposed to be talking about courage today, but, and there they go. There's a fear. So they're like, but I really feel like I need to talk more about productivity. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're going to tie those together and figure out why you don't want to talk about courage. Okay. But like, that's the beauty of having that flexibility, I think, for us as coaches. I cannot imagine at any point getting on a call with anybody and saying, so we had a discovery call. How are you today? Like, so what's up? What do you want to talk about? I think that's where the framework can really be a benefit, is having that's something that you as a coach use. And to your point, John, getting on those calls with people, it's like anybody trying to sell you anything. Hello, ma'am. Welcome. Thank you for speaking to me today. And they try so hard to sound natural. The inflection in their voice and all of that. And I'm like, oh, you poor thing. Who trained you? It's not your fault. It's who trained you. Right? Because it just sounds so fake. And I don't know. I think you're right. People are more savvy these days. And I think that's when you lose them, because you lose that authenticity of the dynamic between yourself and the client.
Yeah. Also is, I mean, some of the coaching I do, and perhaps you as well, is a little more specific and directed. So if I'm working with someone on their presentation skills, and you're mentioning personal persuasion, I do specific coaching in those areas with people. I have to lead the way on that because they don't know where to go. So I have to pretty much lay stuff out that this is where we're going to go. But even with that, I've had stuff come up in sessions that we've just had to deal with in the session.
Absolutely.
That wasn't planned. Now, if you end up with somebody who's like, I don't know why I'm crying about this. This is like, yeah, I thought we were just talking about creating an outline for a presentation, and they're in tears. They're like, why am I so upset? There's other stuff going on. And I'm always going to, not necessarily lean up, I'm going to give that space. And it's just like, well, that's what's coming up. So let's deal with that. And I would say, this is okay. You don't have to be concerned about why this is happening. Just know that it is, and it's okay. And this is a safe space for that. So let it out, and let's see if there's something here that we need to talk about or process. I would much rather do that. And it might derail my plan for the session, but so what?
Well, listen, it's not about our plan. That's the key. That's my point. It's not about our plan for the session. It's about us, I think, creating a spark. And that's how I look at each of my topics. It's like, I'm looking to create a spark, and the actual session itself is going to dictate what type of flame I get. Is it kind of fizzling? I keep having a blow on it and it's a little more difficult, or does it turn into this big roaring bonfire flame where I know we've hit a spot where we need to focus? Also, if I find a topic that is it's turning into a deeper conversation, I know we haven't wasted any time. I may be talking about something or planning to talk about something different in the next session, but I need to give this topic space. And I will say, you know what? We were going to be talking about this next time, but I'm seeing that this may be something we need to put some more work into. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I think so. But I don't just go, okay, we'll just talk about it next time. I will give them a directive. I will say, so this is what I'd like you to do between now and then, and give them some kind of call to action that helps prepare for that. Because I'm, again, bird's eye view. What am I seeing? What do we need to focus on? Because usually if it's that big a content, if it's that big a topic or session for them, there's probably a lot of big stuff going on. We can't hit all the big stuff. So I'm very specific about what I might want them to focus on. And it might be, tell me 2 or 3 things that, be prepared to discuss those in our next session. Something like that, I think that's important.
Yeah, that is a number of the client organizations that I worked with that have had has been somewhat generalist coaching, and some have been very specific kind of coaching. And even then, even when it is specific, you're right, you need to have space around that because other stuff's going to come up from time to time. It is still just a guide, a framework for you to go through. You still need to be there as a coach, ultimately. So yeah, there's different kinds of coaching. So most of the time, if you're then coaching for an organization, you may find yourself either doing their path of coaching or you're doing kind of more generalist coaching anyway. If you have your own coaching practice, the chances are you're going to be a little bit more niche about it, or you will need to be, and you need to be offering a specific transformation that you do need to have or be able to demonstrate that there is a framework, there is a journey to take together. That's also going to help set the frame for your clients to know, have some level of what to expect on the journey and the sessions without giving the whole thing away to them. It sets the tone, the pathway for them, and this is the roadmap to transformation. These are the elements that we need to spend some time on in our sessions. So I think for people who have their own business as a coach, who have that bit more niche down, being able to have your own framework, which may be bits that you've taken from all sorts of other places, but actually roadmaps the journey for the client in a big picture overview kind of way, is really helpful.
Listen, I agree. And I also feel like nobody's going to hire me. Like, you brought up something else that I hadn't thought about. When I get hired by a company of any size, they want to know, well, if we're going to pay you X amount of dollars to create a cohesive environment for our community, what are you going to do? Then how are you going to do it? Because we're going to pay you a lot of money to do this. We want to know. So again, I don't give them every little detail, but I definitely draw from A to B, think about a map or a recipe. Here's the ingredients that are going into the recipe. I don't necessarily, I don't describe what the eggs do within the recipe, for example, but I do say, like, these are the components that go in and this is the outcome, to your point. So I think it's important that even if you're working in a one-to-one framework with a client, not necessarily with a big organization, it's got to be the same. They have to know what to expect. And I tell people, I never, ever make a promise with the one-on-one, like, by the time we're done with this, you're going to be able to do. I don't know what they're going to be able to do because I don't know how this is going to work for them. So it is a little different when you are consulting, right? Because you're being a little bit more specific. They want to know much more, like, what am I getting out of this if I'm hiring you to work with our teams? So I think that's important to remember and keep top of mind. But when you're working one-to-one, it's more intimate right out of the gate, right? I have people telling me things that they have never and would never, they feel like, ever say to a spouse or a family member or their best friend. So it is that safe space that you referred to earlier. I don't feel like that's what you said. I don't feel like that's what happens when I'm working with, like, a bigger organization. However, 9 times out of 10, I'd probably get, I don't know, I wouldn't even want to know the percentage at this point, but I have people that go, I really love what we're doing here, but I do want to go deeper. Can I hire you? Absolutely, you can hire me, right? So that's good stuff. Working in that one-to-one space is usually much more intimate. And I think because of that, it does make sense to have the flexibility to meet them. Like you said, we could be talking about your skills in speaking or anything like that, and all of a sudden there's hysterics. Might be sitting there going, gosh, we're just talking about speech. What just happened? Well, something's there, and you have to know how to navigate that when it happens.
Yeah, in a way that's going to hopefully support them and see it through, help them get to the other side of it, which I do find usually happens. And a lot of that just comes from the same. Sometimes there's just something in people that they need to let out, and they just need that safe space, and that safe person to be able to let stuff out with.
Agree.
And that can often be a resolution in itself. It seems that our general consensus, if we can say that there is that, I think we're pretty close to it, is that the frameworks are good to have. They're good guidelines and they help you to keep things on track. but we want to have lots of flexibility around them as well. And I think good coaches, we both seem to think good coaches should be able to maintain that, have a direction and a path and a framework, but be super flexible within that to the client needs and directives, especially stuff that comes up in the moment.
I think it's something that practice makes, and I don't want to say perfect because I don't believe in it, but practice makes things happen. And that's great. You're not going to maybe get this right out of the gate, and it may feel nerve-wracking and wonky, I think, for some. And I think for others, it might be more natural. I think that a lot of how I navigate through is because I've done frameworks so many times that I don't have to go back to a piece of paper and go, oh, wait, what am I supposed to ask here? Right? It becomes just more second nature. And that's the beauty. That's how, like, I can navigate this. I can create an open forum, if you will, while maintaining control at the same time of the session. So all good stuff.
Well, I hope that helps our listener as well. And certainly I think having some examples of stuff that goes into coaching frameworks is probably quite helpful as well.
Yeah.
They're good to use, just don't be too rigid around it. Angie, as always, this has been a fun conversation, and I think we should come back. We've got so many things we want to discuss, right? We've got this
never ending.
This huge list of topics. It's like, all right, that'd be a great show. That'd be a great show. We've compiled it. So we are not going to run short of ideas for what we're going to talk about in these episodes anytime soon. We're going to be back with more for you next week, and we hope you'll join us for that. And in the meantime, do leave us a message on our voicemail. It's free, it's online, and we'd love to hear from you. It's speakpipe.com. Go to speakpipe.com/The Coaching Clinic Podcast and leave us a message, and we will probably most likely feature you on the show if you do, so long as it's not filth. Or we don't want filth. Don't leave us filth. We do want
film. Don't listen to him.
Well, we do want that, but we don't want to feature it on the show. So do leave us your voice messages, and we'll look forward to hearing you. And in the meantime, have yourselves an amazing week.
Bye for now.